Welcome to Global Wisconsin, presented by the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Zach Zabel. Join us as we explore the vast economic opportunities and insightful veteran contributions within Wisconsin. From local startups to large enterprises, we're uncovering the potential of our great state. So whether you're deeply invested or simply curious, tune in as we delve into the opportunity of a global Wisconsin. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me. Global Wisconsin, episode number 2. Very excited. I appreciate you making the drive. And why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Zach, thank you very much for inviting me. The timing came pretty well as we're doing the Construction Owner Summit for the veteran owners. So that wasn't planned originally, but as we had this time set up, it just lined up perfectly. But I'm from Indiana, Purdue grad. Been in the construction industry for over 20 years, and from a professional standpoint, grew and scaled construction companies. From a financial accounting standpoint, most recently, W-2 job about 3 or 4 years ago was a $30 million electrical contractor company. We grew it to $90 million in 5 years.
Because $30 million wasn't enough, right?
Yeah, no.
Excellent.
So that was a pretty cool experience. COVID hit, and the timing was right, and we sold the company for a 12 times multiple.
Well, that works too.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about that transition.
Yeah. So since then, it was COVID. Worked my butt off. Took about a year off just to kind of self-reflect. Kind of redefined and refound myself.
Sure.
And during that process, I realized that in the construction industry, it's very unrecognized as a job or a profession or an industry something that actually drives so much in our economy.
For sure. Absolutely. That's anybody who watched episode 1, we touched on that very briefly, but part of the reason I was excited to have you is that, construction, even given the supply chain issues, post-pandemic, there's still a massive industry, right? So that's interesting context, that you recognize this obviously crucial sector, but perhaps maybe a gap, in efficacy.
Yeah. So like even if you went to school, education, they wouldn't teach you anything about construction. So you have all these business owners that are in the construction industry.
Sure. And
they grew up, with their tools, wearing their tools.
Yep.
And, they are very successful people, but, the culture here kind of portrays that, hey, you didn't go to college, you're not smart.
Right.
So it's one of those situations where, even as these construction business owners are successful and grow, they don't think that they're smart and successful.
Interesting. So that's something you just observe generally in the industry, that even these very hyper successful construction professionals maybe have this nagging maybe perception of themselves based on their experience?
Yes.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, it does.
So talk a little bit about that. I know in my experience, in different roles that I've had, before the chamber, and growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, again, that narrative, right, and pushed from, your entire childhood, it's college or bust,
Right.
And that was the narrative. And obviously now in 2024, I think as a society, we're growing out of that, a bit. And part of that's fueled by the shortage, in the trades and the demand that we have to continue to build things and renovate and be innovative in that space. But now we've had 20, 30 years of college or bust, and the interest level maybe isn't where it should be. Talk a little bit about, just the industry in general and how do you attract those younger, whether high school or early stage potential, the next level of employees. Yeah, next generation.
Well, it's actually funny that you mentioned about the trade shortage. We're actually 1.8 million people of skilled trades short as of now.
That sounds like a problem.
It's a big one because not only are we short now, majority of our trade skills are on the upper side of the age.
Sure.
So these past 20 years where we've been focusing on college, we're going to see a larger gap in these skilled trades.
That's really interesting because you hear that same story across sectors, right? We had, Rebecca Duchesne from New North on episode 1, and it doesn't matter, different workforce boards or workforce professionals you talk to, insurance and risk management, inverted age pyramid, financial, the banking industry, inverted age pyramid. And I know from a demographic standpoint, it's not a perfect pyramid from a population standpoint. It's a little more, parallel than ideally we would want, from an economic standpoint. So then what do you do, specifically in the construction or just the trades in general to, change that narrative? Why should, say, a graduating 18-year-old choose the trades versus college or just joining the workforce?
Sure. Actually, we are seeing a shift. A lot of business owners realize that we have to do something. The business owners, need to do something.
Sure.
The business owners are now getting more involved in high school and educating, these teenagers that, hey, you don't have to go to college. You don't have to go in debt and make no money for 4 years. Instead, you could come work in a skilled trade, get on-the-job training, and get paid. And I don't know statistics, but you think about 4 years of pay versus 4 years of debt.
Right.
That's going in a different direction.
Yeah, that obviously sounds great, right? I know my own path, after I separated from active duty, even more motivation to pursue the college route because of the GI Bill and, various education benefits. And I'm perfectly comfortable saying that not everybody that I shared the classroom with should be there. And I think that's maybe part of the narrative that doesn't get talked about a lot either, is if we push college as the only way to success, those folks that maybe college, traditional 4-year institutions, that's not a good path for them. You mentioned self-perception, if they fail in college and that was the only way to be successful as far as they were told, now they maybe feel like, a loser or not, they don't have it in them to be successful. So I love that, just that statement, right? Right. So help those teenagers understand there's more than one path,
Right.
And actually it's something I, again, in a previous career, at a job fair at a rural high school, and watching all of the trades, this would have been 2019, I think, when I attended this event. All the trades had booths equal to the colleges.
Okay.
And that was the first time, again, growing up when I did, and I had my little vendor booth, my small business. I was trying to hire high school students as well. But just witnessing that was really, it made me feel good, that we're kind of growing out of this very narrow-minded, idea of what success can be. And I think entrepreneurship, and that's something at the Veterans Chamber, that we obviously support regardless of your veteran status. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously there are different ways to get into the construction industry, whether you want to own your own business and have a, maybe a smaller operation to start, or you mentioned W-2, type employment opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that? Sure.
In a lot of the skilled trades, there is a career path in construction. Like if you think, a plumber, electrician, a millwright, a concrete layer, yes, you do start from the ground, right? That's how most of us start.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is that, there's a quick path of being able to make six figures in the construction industry if you work for it.
Okay. Interesting. Can you give maybe an example or two?
Sure. So there's apprentice program, and after 4 years, then you get your journey's license. And then after that, you can get your master's license. As you work for construction companies, there's different layers of the construction industry.
Okay.
So construction industry, you need like a safety manager, you need superintendents, you need project managers. So you have all these other positions within the construction industry, and most of those positions make over six figures.
Interesting. And I know there are a lot of sectors that want to kind of break down those perception barriers. I know healthcare is one where, it's not just doctors and nurses, right? There's IT and there's admin and there's different roles. Can you maybe talk what are some construction roles that you don't have to start necessarily by swinging a hammer or, something of that nature where it's maybe different? A different path.
Sure. So, a construction business is a business.
Sure.
So even if you look at, Tesla, they have HR, they have IT, they have PR, they got marketing. These construction business owners, they have all those fundamentals too.
Okay. And then would you say that just in your experience, are construction owners looking for construction people to fill those roles, or are there pathways for non-construction folks, maybe for those individuals where the four-year institution makes sense and they get a degree in accounting or marketing or something of that nature? How are they connecting with those construction owners?
Yeah, I would say that it's typical just with any business. I mean, if you have a marketing background and they have a marketing department, then obviously they would search out for marketing jobs. Accounting, IT. I mean, construction is pretty much similar to any other business besides the fact that from an accounting standpoint, it's probably one of the most complex businesses to actually run, and from an operational standpoint.
Okay.
The reason is like you think of construction, every job or every project is different.
Sure. Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that. So specifically, and obviously, relevant to DAAXIT and what you do, talk a little bit more about that accounting and finance, or, what's different or what's complex about it.
Sure. So, a company could be building a McDonald's,
sure,
and not every McDonald's is the same.
Okay.
If you come in and work in this office right here, this office is different than the office across the street.
For sure.
So as business owners, you have to understand the complexities to be able to bid on that job and still be profitable.
Okay. And I know myself, I'm ignorant to bid processes and, how that works. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some common issues or pitfalls, or what affects profitability in that?
Yeah. Well, the last thing that most business owners think about is financials and making money.
Interesting. That's not what I would have guessed.
Yeah. Yeah. So a business owner is concerned about getting the job.
Sure.
And getting the job done.
Okay.
And then when all's said and done, did I make money?
Wow. All right. That seems a little risky.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I think it's they're scared, probably.
Okay.
They have a CPA firm that'll do their taxes once a year.
Sure.
So a lot of times these business owners think, well, I'll get my taxes done at the end of the year, and then I'll find out if I made money or not.
I don't know. My anxiety could handle that delayed. Okay. So what's a better route then?
Yeah, and that's where actually DAAXIT comes in.
Sure.
With our experience, we're able to dive into their numbers, their financials very quickly. And what we do is we produce their financials accurately and timely monthly.
Okay. So how does that work with these longer projects, to have these monthly updates? I guess what's the value or what, why is that important?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because what we do is we also dig into their jobs and we track their profitability as they go along. And what that does is that teaches the business owner, and we educate them to look at where you're making money and where you're losing money.
Interesting. So in your experience, is there a common area where they are maybe underestimating costs and where people are usually losing money?
Yes. So that they don't know what their cost of labor was on a job. They don't know the hours on the job. They might bid the job where the full pay rate would be $50 an hour. But if you start thinking about benefits and everything else, it might be $65.
Oh, it's a pretty significant gap there.
Yes.
It probably eats up the margin pretty quick.
Yes.
Interesting. And again, not coming from the industry, this is all new. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, DAAXIT, and that's kind of your role.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit maybe back up a little bit.
Sure.
As far as DAAXIT goes, how did that come about, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah. So that, I kind of mentioned earlier that I feel that the construction industry is neglected. One of DAAXIT's roles and purposes is to educate and transform the industry, because what I've realized is that you have these people that had the tools and then grew a business, but now they're business owners, and nobody's telling them how to be a business owner.
Sure. And this is really interesting because we see that I see it in the nonprofit space all the time. A nonprofit will start from a group of passionate individuals. They'll grow and scale it successfully because they're passionate and people kind of latch onto it. And then they get to a kind of an inflection point, right? Where you can no longer successfully conduct your business or your operations the way you have traditionally. And you need to continue to scale. But then do you have in most cases, the bravery, to make that change? And I don't know in the construction sector, but nonprofits, it's usually dominated by people that don't like change. They have a mission, they're trying to solve a problem, they're very passionate, as I mentioned, but then you get to that point where, now we're getting to a point of success where we need to hire professional firms. And again, financial is usually the downfall of a lot of nonprofits because they don't have that business acumen because they were traditionally, insert job X, they retired and now they have time and they want to get involved, in philanthropy. And it's just a reoccurring issue, especially in the veteran space, through those traditional congressionally chartered VSOs, American Legion, VFW, and those posts rise and fall based on who's running them, right? And the amount of business acumen and innovation that they're able to bring. Are there any parallels, I guess, to the construction industry where, insert person here, they started a gig from an entrepreneurship standpoint, hired some good people, and suddenly, they're winning all these bids and making all this money, but don't understand how to control the growth?
Yes. So I have a saying that I use. I call it growing broke. So when a business owner kind of starts their own business, they may grow to, 1 to 5 million, and they have their pulse on everything that's going on.
Because they're so engaged and so close to what's actually happening.
Right. And it's unfortunate, even at the size of 1 to 5 million, they're still just looking at their bank account, making sure that they pay their vendors and their employees.
That's wild. So I guess what should they be focused on, or what would be, what's that better avenue?
Yes. So putting tools in place, having somebody that's an expert that understands the construction industry. That's another fallacy that I see that's happening to these business owners is you have these experts that say that they're experts and they say, hey, this is how you should run your construction business, but they've never ran a construction business.
That's interesting. So how do you balance that with, so earlier we talked about, say there's an individual in the financial, they got their bachelor's in accounting or whatever, and they want to get hired for a construction firm. So would you say that, that's not a problem, to just be an accountant, but that business still needs to have, services from a firm like DAAXIT to supplement that gap in knowledge to connect construction and finance?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, the parallels in my experience across sectors is because you don't need to be a business professional to start a nonprofit. And you don't need to be a business professional to start a construction firm. But again, like growing broke, I like that. And I think that is a good segue into, we mentioned the Construction Owners Summit, which obviously is a joint effort with DAAXIT and the Veterans Chamber and Lumber. Can you talk a little bit about, again, kind of the origin story? How did this come about?
Yeah, so actually met Lou Perez at Lumber, and we had some great synergy, and he's really a market genius from a business standpoint. And we have a lot of the same philosophies of helping out people and helping the construction industry and trying to change the construction industry so that it is not underutilized from an educational and resource perspective.
Okay. And so other than the summit, what was the discussion? How do you plan to achieve that?
The the summit is May 9th in Waukesha County Technical College, and we are bringing, I believe, 13 speakers across the nation, and multiple of them are veteran speakers, and yourself is included.
Yes, I'm excited. I think it'll be a great opportunity.
And would you like to mention what you're going to speak on?
Yeah. So anybody who is involved with the Veterans Chamber knows that one of my interest areas are barriers that veterans face in the workforce as a very high level topic. And part of that was addressed when we at the Veterans Chamber created our Invest in Vets program. So I'm pretty sure I brought up Invest in Vets as a shameless plug in episode 1, but I'm going to do it again. So when we're creating this program, we acknowledge the great work that's being done by DWD, WDVA, other nonprofits to find that unemployed veteran and lead them to a job, and find an unemployed veteran and lead them to a job, which is noble work and it's absolutely necessary. But the gap that we found is, instead of facing the individual unemployed veteran, when you look at the business, is the business prepared to hire that veteran? Do they understand, what are the barriers that veteran faced, previously? And even in our current environment where unemployment is very low, instead of finding that unemployed veteran, now those businesses have to take the approach of, well, now you're competing, right? So that veteran's employed somewhere else. So you're not finding that unemployed veteran, you're competing to steal that employee from a competitor, which is a much different mindset, right? And what we noticed is there's kind of this lagging narrative of, we want to help the veterans. And there's kind of this, generic positive, but, stereotype of, helping veterans. We just like helping veterans.
Right.
Okay, well, what are you doing to accomplish that? So you need to understand the problems first off, which I don't think a lot of people do. I think veteran unemployment is still viewed as this massive issue, when veteran unemployment has really matched well with non-veteran unemployment for the past decade or so, which is, again, a positive thing. We don't want unemployment to be a problem, but then the programs and assistance needs to adapt to that new reality. We don't have a Rolodex of unemployed veterans that you just show up and ask for them, and we're like, oh, well, Tom, Dick, and Sally would be good fits. Here's their information. Now it's, how do we craft a veteran talent acquisition initiative at our business to get the message out, number one, and then have the message be impactful to have veterans want to work for us.
Right.
And it's shocking how many businesses have never even gone through that thought process. So similar to what you're saying about, you get to a point and you kind of have an idea and you just kind of wing it and hope it works. The Invest in Vets program is a consulting service we offer to businesses that want to make sure you're actually being intentional about your veteran talent initiatives. So again, shameless plug. I'm fine with it, but I appreciate you setting that up. And so that topic generically is what I'm going to be talking about at the Construction Owner Summit. Is, as you mentioned, you have these companies. Obviously, talent is a shortage, period, across sectors. But then not only how do we develop the talent to make the pool a little richer, but also how do you find them? Right. And when it comes to, the construction industry, when there's a shortage and you're hiring new people, unless they're new graduates or new trainees, you're stealing them from somebody else. So that's a completely different mindset when it comes to hiring. So that's kind of what I'll be talking about.
That's great. That's awesome. And, I honestly believe that, the skilled trades and the veterans, it is a really good fit.
Absolutely. No doubt. There's some really interesting, and again, I mentioned my area of research, and what I've been able to find in the literature is veterans that have a specific trade in the armed forces are overrepresented in the trades, period. So like you mentioned, plumber, like if I was a plumber in the Navy and I get out and I want to be a plumber, the number, the percentage of veteran plumbers is above the average percentage of veterans. So, and I don't know the 2024 figures because they changed so much, but let's say if veterans are 10%, of the population, the number of plumbers who are veterans is 13 to 15%. So veterans are overrepresented in the trades, and that goes for welders, any type of builders, construction, things of that nature. And I think that speaks to what you said. It is a good fit, so we have that, work mentality, not afraid to get stuff done. And obviously in the construction industry, completing projects is somewhat important still.
Right.
But no, I think that's good. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about that at the Construction Owners Summit.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the Construction Owners Summit is geared to the business owners so that they can attract talent and even veterans. We actually have 3 or 4 speakers that are going to be talking about employee health, workforce development. I personally, I'm a profitable guy, so I'm going to be talking about how to pay your employees more and make more money.
Sure. Hopefully I'll be able to attend that, because that's a conversation that I have often in our Invest in Vets program. Because obviously, as you know, across sectors, labor is a big cost, your wages, employees. And for some reason, there seems to be this notion that, well, if we minimize that, we'll be profitable. When they don't factor in the cost to acquire, an employee, the cost to train, it takes time. And then if you don't have a retention, whether it's ERGs or the different things we talk about in Invest in Vets, which, by the way, can be applied across your whole organization. It's not just veterans. Have you calculated that cost in?
Right.
So hopefully I'll be able to attend, because I would love to hear that.
Yeah, you bring up a very valid point about, I don't want to spend money to make money, but you actually do have to spend money to make money.
Which, if you ask people generically, they'll agree with you. It's like, yeah, you have to spend money to make money. That's a common phrase, in America. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be applied.
No. And I try to debunk that, because, if you do the training, you do spend the money on training, your employees are going to be more effective. They're going to be more appreciated. If you spend the money on safety, they're going to be safe. They're not going to hurt themselves on the job. And you train them to, you offer HR benefits, all these things. Yes, that does increase your overhead, but what if you increase your productivity times 2?
Right. And that's kind of and I forget, and I apologize, maybe I'll be able to put a note when we produce this. There was I don't know if it's a comic or there was something I read where, what's it going to cost, to pay the employees more? It's like, well, what's it going to cost if we don't? Yeah, so it's kind of this understanding that not everything is a linear path, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just a binary, we either do or don't. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity cost of, okay, well, if we don't, we're going to save X amount of dollars now, but what's it going to cost us in the long run?
Right.
And having that investment mindset in your workforce is obviously something I endorse.
Yeah. So, one of the other theories that I'm debunking, but does kind of work with supply and demand, is obviously we have a shortage, right? And the demand's higher. So what I'm trying to tell these business owners, you can raise your prices, make more money, and still get the work.
Which is interesting, because I guarantee you talk to any of them and they say, well, if the price of lumber goes up, you have to pay more.
Right.
If the price of hardware, screws, tools, whatever. But for some reason, when it comes to workforce, they view that as a commodity that you can minimize and try to get by. Right. So I'm with you. I support you 100%.
That's interesting. I'm glad you actually put a different perspective and spin on that. I'll remember that.
Yeah, feel free. Feel free to use that. And I know in our we had a little bit of a discussion, prior to the podcast, and you talk about these financial disasters
yes.
in the construction industry, and I've already hopefully identified my ignorance to the construction industry. So talk a little bit more about that. What does that mean?
Right. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of experts in the field, but they've never actually ran a construction company, and these business owners rely on these experts. And also they rely on the people that are in their staff, and they just a lot of times just continue to do what they do, and they don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's where DAAXIT will come in and strategically review their processes and procedures, look over their financial statements, and then we start creating a game plan to be a strategic construction company.
Interesting. So is there, I guess, a common type of partnership? Is this more of a temporary consultant relationship? Is this more of an ongoing long-term engagement? What does that look like?
Yeah. It turns out to be a long-term engagement typically. Our contracts specifically are 1 year long. We guarantee our service.
Okay.
We'll give you a refund if you don't make more money with us.
Wow. All right. We should probably highlight that somewhere. That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And how are you able to, I guess, promise that?
Well, it's part of our onboarding process, to be honest.
Okay.
We have a 3-step process. We get to know the business owner. We're very selective, and we have to figure out if this business owner is able and willing to learn.
Interesting.
Then we have a second 90-minute strategic plan where we dive into their financials. And right there on spot, we develop a plan to make them more profitable. And from that perspective, from that point, I can guarantee that they're going to make more money.
Interesting. It's almost like a bar rescue for construction companies. Like, you have to have buy-in, right? It's not something I can come in with all the good ideas in the world, but if you're not going to implement them the way that they need to be implemented, it's not going to work.
Right.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. And I'd like to add, we're 100% successful.
Well, you're still in business, right? So if you guarantee your services, you kind of have to be successful to continue moving this. So that's fantastic. I don't know if I've ever heard of that before, guaranteeing more profitable.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else on financial?
No. From a DAAXIT standpoint, it's more of a relationship, to be honest. Okay. We get to learn the business owners, I call them limited beliefs, and we identify some of those items, just like we said, if I give my employees a $5 raise, that means I'm going to lose more money. Mm-hmm. No, you can bid that into your jobs and actually make more money.
That's wild. I don't know. And again, it might just be my ignorance to the industry, but from an outside perspective, that just seems to make sense. That's how a lot of other industries work.
Right.
You see it again with the inflation that we're experiencing as a society. Well, the cost of everything has gone up. Well, why is that? Well, the cost of the inputs have gone up, and that's the validation, or at least the narrative that we're being told, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't that also work in the bid process?
Yeah.
I suppose you have some fear, right? Some fear of not getting the bid.
Most definitely.
Talk a little bit, and again, I've never been through a bid process.
Right.
How does the construction owner have the confidence to have a higher bid to compensate for those increased, whether it's wages or
mm-hmm.
Whatever that looks like?
Well, the funny thing is that is the fear, and I guess I'll give you a story here.
Sure.
Right.
I love stories.
Okay, so we have this contractor here in Wisconsin, and this business owner has 5 project managers. And DAAXIT came in and did an analysis. They were a negative 2% net income.
Okay.
And what we realized that they weren't carrying in their bids enough cost to cover their labor.
Okay.
And talked with the business owner about 3 times. Said, "Hey, you got to raise your costs up 20%." And the business owner's like, we finally got him to buy in. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, he had us sit down with his whole team, with the project managers, and said, "Hey, we're going to raise this up 20%.
How'd that go?
Well, I'll tell you. So we came in 3 months later, and I didn't purposely try doing this, but it's funny that how it came about. I went to one project manager because I was scared, telling people, "Hey, you got to raise your prices." What happens? They get no work and they close their doors.
Right.
Then that'd be
catastrophic.
Right. So went to the first project manager and said, "Hey, did you raise your prices?" And he's like, "Yeah, I did." I was like, "Cool." I go, "Did you get the jobs that you wanted?" He said, "Yes." Did any of the clients know you raised your prices? No. Went to the next project manager. I said, "Hey, did you raise your prices?" "Yes." "Did you get the jobs you wanted?" "Yes." "Did the client know?" "No." So I went, down through the 5 project managers, and then I looked to the business owner, and he's still bidding on some jobs. I go, did you raise your prices? And he said, no. He didn't
even know?
He was too scared to raise his prices.
Oh, no. Oh, interesting. How does that work?
Well, those are the barriers that, that we help business owners overcome.
I was really waiting for like this giant payoff at the end of the story.
Okay. I'll tell you the end of the story. They went from losing $200,000 making $1.6 million that year.
That's wild. So the project managers, when they were and again, this is my ignorance of the industry. Are they the ones that create the bids? How does that work?
Yes. So they do in this company, they do the estimating, they create the bids, and they actually sell the project to the clients.
Okay.
And so did the business owner at this organization.
Interesting. So all the project managers bought in though.
Yes.
They raised the prices. It wasn't to the point where the clients seemed to notice.
Right.
But the actual business owner working on separate projects did not.
Correct.
And they still made additional.
Yes. So we came in 3 months later, did that roundtable questionnaire.
Sure.
And then the business owner increased his prices. And then, a full year, they went from a negative profit to 10% net income.
Wow. I mean, that's a great story. It's really interesting. And again, there are, I think, narratives or lessons in the conversation that can be applied, outside the construction sector, where or even within the, I've done, so at the Veterans Chamber, we do technical assistance for small businesses. You don't have to be veteran owned. We just want to help, small business because we believe small business is crucial to the economy in Wisconsin. And recently I had a conversation with a small firm. They do remodeling and, different things of that nature for personal homes. And we had this conversation. I'm making okay money. Workforce is a problem, trying to find, good help. And, we talked, of course, me being my workforce background. Well, do you pay your employees fairly? Yeah, I feel like I pay fairly. I don't have complaints about, compensation. And it was like, okay, well, what percentage of your bids, do you win? Well, almost all of them. It's like, okay, well, have you thought that you don't charge enough, for what? Because again, if you apply that to any other industry, right. You go into a grocery store and the shelves are empty because they sell everything as soon as they put it on the shelf. Maybe your prices are too low, right? Maybe milk shouldn't be 10 cents,
right.
And your margins, hopefully profitable, or like you said, even potentially losing money and then not making changes. If you're losing money, you should probably do an assessment, maybe bring in an expert like DAAXIT, have that conversation. People not always ready or emotionally prepared to do that.
And I think part of that is, our part of the culture is knowing your value,
Sure.
What you bring to the table. If you're a contractor and you perform well and your end project is like phenomenal. I mean, come on, let's make some money too.
Right. And again, I don't know if there's a negative narrative around that. When you're in other fields, nobody seems to have a problem asking for compensation for your expertise. Right. And we even see this in the digital space, so there seems to be, whether it's graphic design or in the IT or digital space, there's just seems to be this narrative of, well, can you just do it? It's like, well, yeah, I can. It'll cost this. Well, I'm not paying that much. I was like, okay, well, then you do it. Right? But it's weird, not, like you said, not all sectors are really treated the same from a professional standpoint.
Yeah. And I think, you kind of mentioned it too, is like, they don't have that. There's not that expertise in the construction industry that will help the business owner understand that. And, I think also this comes back to, the business owner had his tools wrapped around his belt, was raised up in middle class and, thinks that, $100,000 paycheck is great and running a $30 million company.
Right.
You took all the risk and you're paying yourself as you're paying your other employees. And, To me, that's not fair.
And again, I don't mean to keep pulling this to the nonprofit space, but it's the exact same story. You have this well-intended, individual, not even an older individual. Maybe this is something they've been passionate about. They start a nonprofit, scale it effectively, and whether it's internal or even external, because in America, nobody seems like nonprofit professionals should be compensated either. And you talked about, based on maybe the overall budget of the organization, there are very large nonprofits run by very professional people who don't make very much. And if we want, and there's a TED Talk that I really enjoyed about the nonprofit industry and kind of this double standard, which is interesting because the construction industry is a for-profit, and it's the exact same problem.
It is.
That's really wild, really interesting. And do you think it's because of this kind of common path, where you came from a certain socioeconomic space, you worked your way up, and do you think that is kind of what's feeding this?
I do believe that that's one of the major reasons. Okay. And then the second, kind of what I mentioned earlier, is like there's really no education for construction business owners.
Interesting.
So if you go, you look at who's working for Tesla or Microsoft or whatever, they're going to be like, hey, let's make profit, let's make our shareholders money.
Right, which nobody seems to have an issue with.
Right, yeah. But there, in my mind, if you're running, a construction company, you're taking all the risk, and you're not paying yourself, then you're doing yourself a dissatisfaction.
That's wild. And I didn't know. I didn't know that was a thing. I just assumed that you kind of had your smaller firms, and then you have the big boys that have the big projects, and just kind of ignorant to the whole thing. So that's really fascinating. The similarities.
It is.
So, obviously you mentioned the education piece. That's part of the mission, right? For
yes.
the CEO Summit.
Yes.
Having that education and whenever you have a bunch of people from a sector in a room, the conversations that occur, and oh yeah, that sucks for me too, and kind of that camaraderie of suffering almost. But I mean, honestly, that's where you can provide the most direct value, and I that's why I'm excited for the summit.
Cool.
So tell me a little bit about, and I know in our emails, what is LIDS?
LIDS.
Yeah, tell me about LIDS. That was a new one for me.
Yeah, so it's called limited internal doctrine syndrome. So it's kind of I kind of mentioned that how a lot of these construction business owners come from middle class, and they grow their business, and they grow the business from 5 million, 15 million, 30 million. And up, and those numbers are kind of what I call lids. And when a business owner can't get a hurdle over where they're at right now, they're not going to get where they want to go.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that, or maybe an example.
Sure. So let's say that you're a $5 million company, and you're pretty much the project manager of all the jobs, and you can't get the mindset of like, hey, if I hire another project manager, then I could spend half my time project managing and half my time working on top of the business, working on the business and growing the business.
Working on the business instead of in the business.
Yes.
Shout out to Jim Ransom.
Yes.
From the EMBA program at Oshkosh. That was always, and I know the Venture Project where we filmed the podcast. Jim's been on a couple of different shows, and that's always something that stuck with me with his feedback and his career. He wishes he would have spent more time working on the business instead of in the business. So
right.
Wanted to give credit where credit was due. That wasn't my phrase.
No.
But yeah, this is really interesting. Again, parallels across sectors, right? Not something that we only see in construction. But what why do you think that this kind of self-inflicted ceiling exists?
Well, the reason is like what you don't know.
Sure. So
once you've gotten to your plateau, who are you gonna surround yourself to get you to the next step? And if you're the highest person as a CEO or a business owner is, that's as far as the company will go. So asking for help in achieving the next level is able to increase the business owner's lid. And once the business owner's lid grows, so will the company.
Interesting. Do you, in your experience, find similarities between different thresholds, or is the problems from 1 to 5 different from the problems from 15 to 30?
Yes, they're different.
Okay.
And that's kind of why I mentioned, the 5 million, the 15 million, the 30 million. At 5 million, the business owners doing everything pretty much. 15 million, now you got, a couple project managers, and you're still kind of doing the project managing. And then once you get to 30 million, then you start hiring, an HR person. You got to have an IT person. You got to have a marketing person. So now you're at 30 million. And I'll kind of tell you another story here too, is what these business owners believe is, hey, I'm going to have to work more to do 15 million versus 5 million. I'm going to have to work more to do 30 million versus 15. So I mentioned that I was a CFO for a $30 million company. And when I came in as their CFO, the business owner actually took a step out of the business and stopped actually running the business. And it was 3 of us that actually ran the business. And he would come in eventually about 4 hours every Thursday to make sure things are going.
Sure.
So the business owner actually took a step out of the business. And I want to mind you, the last 3 years, they were stuck at 30 million.
Sure.
So the business owner actually took a step out of the business, hired the team to run the business, and we took it from 30 million to 90.
And that's really interesting in a lot of the small business consulting I've done. Obviously, you're not at those annual revenue, but the story is exactly the same. Is a lot of entrepreneurs like the control. They like being in it. If they built the company, they probably enjoy what they're doing. But quite often, when everything flows through a single individual, you have that bottleneck, right? Where your margins are great, like everything's fantastic, you got it all figured out, but you're still providing that bottleneck, which is limiting your growth.
Right.
And so, that part makes perfect sense to me, because now it's the exact same conversation I have with small businesses across sectors.
Yep.
Of, well, I do this and I do this and I do that, and this is why we do it, and we're profitable and I'm happy. It's like, cool, sounds great. But if I want to grow my business, we haven't really grown in the last 3-5 years. I was like, okay, so what's the problem? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, for me, that narrows it down. Because if everything's going perfectly well and you're not growing, it might be you. And a lot of business owners, especially small business owners, don't want to have that conversation. They don't, whether it's, company culture, whether it's processes, that's a whole nother thing where if everything flows through the business owner and, well, we need to maximize process because this is a bottleneck and this is a bottleneck and this is slowing things down and this is limiting efficiency and, XYZ. Well, that's what they're comfortable with. And when you have a single gatekeeper for all production, their comfort is paramount because everything has to go through them. So they want things the way that they like it. And then when like you mentioned, you expand to a team, well, they have different preferences and they have different ways to communicate. And so it's an interesting journey to have. And again, whether it's a small business, maybe a more modest revenue, or these, construction firms, that have a few million in revenue, those team dynamics are the same. Building out the team, processes that work for everybody. And it makes perfect sense to me that the business owner stepping out actually makes room, for more growth and more activity. Mm-hmm. So that makes perfect sense to me. And again, I was really interested. I like, I'm military, so I like acronyms. But this concept of lids is interesting.
Yeah, and kind of, to reiterate what you said, because I feel like, even nonprofit construction, we're saying the same things. One of the things is that I try to tell business owners, I go, did you start your own business to have a job, or did you start your business to have a business? Mm-hmm. And you look at most of these business owners, they have a job.
Yes. Yep. For one reason or another, they didn't like your boss. They didn't like, where they were. It's like, well, I can do it better myself. And then they're stuck in this kind of prove it mindset where they have to, break their back, proving that they can do it better. And it's just not sustainable, especially if you want to grow, but also from that work-life balance, mental health. That checks out. I know we covered a lot. We mentioned the Construction Owner Summit, which is great. Kind of the origin story of DAAXIT. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that's relevant?
Or
even not relevant?
Not relevant. Yeah. I guess, did I tell you how we got the name of DAAXIT?
I don't, or you didn't. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious.
All right, cool. So we have we're trying to figure out a name for our company, and we have a German Shepherd, and she's very smart, very family oriented, very loyal.
Sure.
And, we were just trying to come up with some names, and her name is Dax. And, we were like, oh, how about Dax? We'll just name the company after Dax. Sure. I was like, and then I said, That's it. That's it.
I love it.
So that's how the name of DAAXIT came about.
That's great. And I know, just me personally, whenever I see a unique company name, I wonder how they came up with that. If it's an acronym or whatever. So that's a great story. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to chat about?
I don't have anything else. In the construction industry, we are giving education seminars around the country. We got some here in Wisconsin, Illinois. We also have an office in Orlando, Florida. So, education's very important to us, because I do want to inform these business owners that it's okay to make money, because, they can also pay their employees more at the same time.
Well, that all sounds good to me. And so, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the economic landscape of Wisconsin. As we conclude today's conversation, remember that the future is brimming with opportunities waiting to be discovered. Your next big venture or partnership might be just one connection away. So don't let the dialogue end here. Follow the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, and become part of a community that's as passionate about Wisconsin's future as you are. Whether you're a local entrepreneur, part of a large enterprise, or someone intrigued by the economic future of our state, your perspective and participation are what make Wisconsin truly thrive. Let's continue to explore, learn, and grow together. Until next time, this is Zach Zabel, thanking you for tuning in to Global Wisconsin. Stay connected, stay informed, and keep looking forward to the next opportunity on the horizon.